proximity is such an important thing, especially for young people. You can only be what you see. You can only be what you hear. If you were never exposed to it, you don't know it exists. It's not something that is attainable for you. I was ignited with this fire. How can we get out there and connect with other people?
Tell me where you wanna go, where you wanna be.
Claima, which is short for Claima Seat at the Table, we exist to better BIPOC communities. We help expose more youth to their potential, what they can become. We're not taught to think about, if you have an idea, do you know you can actually go start a business and bring this to life? What's up, Claima fam? This is Bimma, and you're listening to Claima Stories. Today we have an amazing episode with Ian Williams of Deadstock Coffee. He's very passionate about community and bringing people together. When we were thinking about starting Claima, I just remember so much happening in the world. So many of these businesses have been significantly impacted. You just feel this intense weight. There needs to be a way to actually re-inspire the entrepreneurial spirit. What is the future that we want to create that is going to be better than what we have been stuck in? And we had this wild idea. What if we made the podcast mobile and it's like a mobile podcast studio? We're going to actually go on the road for 30 days traveling the West Coast. And just imagine seeing that van roll out and looking like nothing we've ever seen before. We want more people to join us on this journey. We knew that that was the one. That's storyteller. The reason today why I feel lighter is not because we have any shortage of problems in the world. I feel lighter today because I feel like we can work towards solutions. We're going to reach an audience that are going to hear some of these things for the first time. And so what I hope that we can do is we can play a small role in helping create thriving businesses that exist for years. To me, Claima is here to expose BIPOC communities to those ideas and to figure out how we can rally to help realize those dreams.
Morning, everybody.
How's it going? I think first I just have to shout out Zephyr. I think there was a lot of love in that chat, but also I was just sitting over here texting BJ, and I was like, I hadn't stopped rocking my head since he started playing. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, gave him a 30-minute set to start the day. I love that.
Seriously, we need that SoundCloud link. Also, thank you to you all for allowing us to come on into your space and to share a little bit about what we do and to speak on the subject of DARE, which I think we can speak at length on as we've been there for the past 2 years. I think the flow of this conversation is, BJ and I are going to share different narratives of what that shows up for both of us in the business of Claima. And I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind was centered around actually how we started, right? And, on paper, we are a podcast. Claima is short for Claima Seat at the Table. And we had started very, very niche in wanting to expose Black and Brown youth to career opportunities, whether those careers were focused in sneakers or focused on the entrepreneurial side of things. And when BJ and I connected initially, it was in about 2018, into 2018, going into 2019. And what was interesting about that period was it was the first time that I, as a professional, was going into a non-compete, which I had no idea what a non-compete was at the time. And what I learned was that it was like, you can't go from this brand to this brand without taking some time off and not realizing that that time would be paid for. And this is the first time in my life that I didn't have to worry about where my money was coming from, right? I grew up in Louisiana, a single parent home. And, since I was 15, I've been working. And so this is the first time in my life where I'm like, what am I gonna do? And BJ and I had been connecting about just so much that had been happening in the world, right? At this time, you had a lot of publicity around lack of representation in corporate spaces, lack of funding for entrepreneurs and small businesses. Funny enough, similar things we're seeing right now. And at the time, we just didn't agree with a lot of the things that the approaches that we were seeing in the space. And it wasn't that we were experts by any means. We're more so just creative and thinking of additional solutions. And the thing that I struggle with kind of pinned back to my upbringing, which is that I love sneakers and I love marketing since I was 9, right? But growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is like 45 minutes outside of New Orleans, there's rarely any, you're not going to run into anyone that's working at a sneaker brand walking down the street in my neighborhood. Like, that's just not happening. Like, I had more examples of things that I probably didn't want, which is, probably, guys that sold drugs or, rappers like Lil Wayne. Like, those are more of the examples. And then, like, my parents worked at chemical plants, right? Like, and they don't want me to go work at chemical plants with dealing with these deadly chemicals. So it was strange. And the whole thing that we kept coming back to was like, I don't even know if people know these careers exist. Like, no one know, they don't know these things exist. And we had this hunch, and we would like meet at Good Coffee on Division, basically like every other day, and just concept ideas and like, how can we go about this? And we started with like these things that were crazy expensive, but ultimately we kind of started to center around conversation and stories and how we can leverage stories to unpack layers and to emotionally connect with people. As we all know, stories have done in a wonderful way. What was funny about that was we have these friends over at Sneaker Week PDX, and they are in like their 4th or 5th year, and they've been planning this event. And we sent them a note and we're like, hey, we're working on this concept. We'd love to maybe get like a small room so that we can crash and burn in private, where we just want to have basically these one-on-one style conversations with established Black and brown professionals about their career journey. Like, how did you go from, for me, Louisiana, to working in entertainment marketing at Nike? Like, how do you do that? And so while we're thinking of this and trying to pitch them on it, they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. We'll figure it out. Y'all curate the guests. It'll be great. And so BJ and I are like, great, we'll do this, and this will be fun. We'll see what happens. Well, funny enough, it gets closer to the event, and they say, hey, well, we have a gap in our programming on the main stage, and we wanted to know if y'all would be interested in bringing your concept to the main stage. That was the dare, right? Like, that's the dare. Go from the tiny room where you can like fail, no one knows, to this big stage. I think additional context here is that while BJ has experience producing various things, I have zero experience interviewing anyone, let alone interviewing anyone on a stage in front of my peers.
I think no one knew that though. Like behind the curtain, no one knew that you'd never interviewed anybody. No one knew that like this is the first time we're doing something. So like, dare me if we can do it again and replicate that.
So, all right, right? Like, he's accurate. Like, these are all like the facts going into this thing. Whatever reason, we naively say, yes, we're gonna do this. And so just to like also amplify the magnitude of like the severity of if things go wrong, this is the environment of all of my Black and brown peers in the industry, people I've probably known for 8 years, also aspiring youth in the audience who want to come into the industry, and also any executive and director that would then maybe promote me if I still go on to stay in the industry, and media.
The president of Foot Locker was there.
Yeah, all of these people are there. So we decided to do it, and we have wonderful guests. We have, Senior Director of Diversity, Jarvis Sam from Nike. We have Rashad Williams, who's VP of Basketball at Adidas. We have Rakaya Adams, who manages the Meyer Memorial Fund. And we have this other woman who's coming from Reebok, Darla, who also focused in diversity. And when I tell you, this is probably the only interviews we have done where production was flawless from end to end. Like, it's BJ on the end of my corner. There's no support screens. There's no like confidence screens telling you when the time's running out. It's BJ in my, my line of sight telling me like, you got 5 minutes left in this conversation. And we're on the stage going through these conversations. I have like a page of like written notes. And it kind of like everything just like faded away. Like the audience is there and you can hear them, but like kind of that, when you're in that live setting, right? That's when you can feel everything, right? It's a little different when we're here in this digital setting and, we're digital faces. Like, I can't feel y'all the way that I could feel you if you were presently sitting here. And it adds a whole different level to everything. And so what was so weird to me was how natural it felt for me for something that I'd never done before. And I just remember sitting there and thinking like, I feel like I've been doing this for years. And it was like, literally, there were no hiccups in the conversation with the guests. It was as if we had spoken for days and years. And by the time we got off the stage, I think I was on the stage for like 3 hours, BJ.
I think it was 4. There was
I was on
like 15-minute intermission, but it was like 4.
It was like 4 hours on this stage, and we get off the stage. I'm completely exhausted. I didn't think it would be that exhausting of a thing, but you have this rush of this dare. And I think the thing that neither one of us expected was how it would impact other people if it actually went well. And what happened from there was this rocket ship that we haven't gotten off yet. But literally, since we got off that stage, people started coming up to us in the audience, and they were like, "Hey, where can we get these conversations?" Or like, do y'all have a podcast? Or what are y'all doing next? And like Footwear News like wrote this article about what we were doing, and in my mind, I was just like, wow, what if we would have said no? Right? Like, what if we would have never, like, if we think to where we are today, if we never would have gotten on that stage, like, there's no way we would have been able to inspire so many people that we have today. Like, we have kids that listen to the podcast in Ghana that, are inspired to go pursue their creative dreams. And I think when I think about dares now, I don't think about them the way, I guess, as I used to. I used to take it very lightly. You take a dare as quite like a joke, but that dare actually changed my life.
Yeah, at no point was I ever scared that anything was going to go wrong. Is the crazy part. Like, from the beginning of when they told us to the end when it was finished, at no point at that time I was like, this might not work out. Like, literally, it felt like everything kept clicking, and we got into a place where it was like a flow state, and it was crazy to see it come together just off proof of concept in like nothing else.
It was just I don't know. I think the doubt just never, we just never allowed that doubt to creep in, and a part of that journey has been, the next biggest dare that we took was going full time into a podcast, right? And we don't think of Claima as a podcast. We see ourselves as a brand and a platform where we can further our storytelling and the mission to help Black and Brown small business owners, discover their dream careers and also expand their businesses and grow their profits. All things that we can do through amplification and storytelling, and also accessibility. I think one of the more recent projects we did, which I think BJ could talk through that there, was a bit of the video that you all just saw, which was a road trip that we took for 30 days. So I'll let BJ take you through that one.
Let me set the stage here. It's about 2 a.m. I'm like half awake, half asleep. my man Bimma over hits me with the text like, "Have you ever heard of a Mitsubishi Delica?" And in my mind, I'm like, "I don't know. Is that is this a troll? Are you like kidding me?" And I'm like, "No." So I kind of wake up and I like Google it, and I'm like, "Yeah, what is this?" And he's like, "It's this van." And I'm like, "Okay, so what do you want to do with the van? What's going on with this?" He's like, "I want to convert this into a mobile podcast studio." And it's 2 a.m. in the morning. And my girlfriend's like, "What are you doing up? And why are you like frantically searching Google right now?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to figure out what he wants to do with this thing." So that's kind of like how like the dare was like, dare can we make a podcast like, studio out of a van? And so then after that, we had plenty of meetings between then and like what was actually going to go down. But it was like, I've gone on several road trips with rappers, hip hop artists, and it's like, what's our version of that? And we had like played around with the fact that like we might go on tour, and this is the best way to do it because we had seen that like things were starting to open up, and we were in a place where people were willing to travel, and it was just the perfect time to get these stories out. So Bimma and I conceptualized this car over about 2 or 3 months and executed over about, I think, 6 weeks. And
6 weeks.
And he sent me a brief and I PM'd this thing from start to finish, and it turned out like what you guys saw there. And this road trip, like one of the things, I used to be a booking producer at a morning show, and the one thing that I noticed when I was a booking producer was the absence of Black and brown stories and small business stories. And one thing that I always like would want to focus on is how do I amplify those stories? That's kind of how I met Bimma. Was when I was a booking producer on the show, I had one of our mutual friends, Cedric Hudson, on there talk about how tech influenced the way he designed product. And he was working for Kanye at the time. And he's like, I should introduce you to my friend Bimma. And we literally had lunch. The lunch was only supposed to be 30 minutes long, ended up being 90 minutes long. And then that's kind of how we started getting on this cadence of like going off, like going to coffee every other day. So when we sit in these meetings, it was like, how do we amplify these Black and brown stories? And now that's now morphed into like small businesses, because during the pandemic, small businesses are the backbone of this country. And how do we amplify those stories, and how do we use our platform to get to those stories? So we went on this 30-day road trip. We went from Portland to SF to LA to Phoenix to Vegas to Salt Lake City to Boise, and interviewed 8 people along the way, all black and brown small businesses. And people don't tell you what it's like on the road being around people for 30 days. It's like, like even your significant other, you get like 8-hour break, like when you're at work. I'm literally next to this guy for 16 hours in a day. Like, it's crazy. It's like, I think right around day 17, you could start seeing the tendencies of people, and like people starting to get a little chippy at each other. And it's just like, but this road trip was just like something that needed to happen for us, and something that needed to happen. We found a really good brand partner, 99 Designs by Vistaprint, to help fuel this idea, and they really believed, and they took the chance on seeing this through. Some of the highlights.
And on top of that, you were producing episodes. I mean, not only were we producing, I mean, you got to talk about like we had started video. We recorded video interviews in this van, and we also recorded like docu-style recaps at every single stop, which was the most other audacious thing that
See, the thing is, when we do these things, I don't think about that stuff. It just like, it comes natural, where it's like, we got to do these things. I got to quarterback all this, but it's really like I'm trying to appreciate the road trip. But like, yeah, we produced 8 episodes, 4 video episodes, 4 recap videos, and those 30 days, it became so much closer to those guys on the trip.
It's like, I think about like the fact that that was something where you're really like, there's no brief for what we just did, right? You're really going off of like, hey, can we actually do this thing? There's no one pressuring us to go on this trip. There's no one waiting for you to go on this trip. And I think the other thing that was interesting about it was, I remember the day that BJ was like, okay, we're gonna go see the van, and we call her Storyteller. And I'm like, wait, so we're actually gonna go see this thing that was on paper? Like, it's now like a thing. And you have this moment where I think that happens in any like dare scenario where like everybody gets excited about talking about it, right? You like any dare, you're like, oh yeah, let's go TP that house, or yeah, like I'm gonna go interview for that job, that might be, I might be like a couple years out of experience. Or, oh yeah, I do want to start like that juice company. But then, like if somebody actually comes with the money, or somebody comes with the offer, or somebody shows up with storytelling, you're like, oh, we have to go on this road trip.
And there's a lot of things
Right.
you have to do during that road trip to keep fulfilling what you had promised to that particular partner or vendor. And it's like, I think while I was on that road trip, I realized that like being an EP on this is not more about producing content. It's more about creating the relationships with our guests. And like literally we get our guests hitting us up every day, like, hey, how's it going? What are you guys working on? How can I help you guys out? Like, we're going to be heading to ComplexCon probably in November, and one of the photographers, guy named Steve Sweatpants, is like, you guys are family, whatever you need from me. And it's just like continually building this network of creatives and small businesses that we can like really help each other out and amplify their stories at the same time. It's something that I like didn't realize till like right after the road trip.
Yeah. I think one question I think for both of us, BJ, would be, I guess, what have you learned by taking maybe some of these dares that we've quote unquote been on? I think the one for me is just I think the biggest thing I've learned is kind of that faith component, right? And in that a lot of times there is no tangible thing that you could look at to be like, oh yeah, that gives me, comfort in that we are on the right path. But I think the thing that has been true here is that having faith in the people that we work with is, I think, the most, to your point, the thing that does bring the most comfort when you're on these journeys, when you're trying to do something that, you haven't, broached before. Like it comes down to the people.
I guess the one thing about dares is like assumptions will be the death of you when it comes to dares, like assuming that you know everything and finding the right people that can give you the information to make that leap of faith is probably the one thing I've learned. Like going dare after dare. I think this is my third business now. I had a streetwear brand for a while. I managed hip hop artists and producers for about 4 or 5 years, and then kind of went corporate route. But like getting as much information as possible, and not assuming things that are true that you think are true until you actually hear it yourself.
Yeah. I think there's also a good part to start officially taking some questions. I know there was one in the chat that was asking, when did we possibly take in, I'm sorry, when did we go full time into this, and was it after Sneaker Week? I think we could both answer this separately. For me, I didn't go full time. I just crossed over full time in what we're doing in August. So August was the first full year in this venture. And so that meant that was over COVID. During the global pandemic, I quit my job at Nike, which was an extremely difficult decision. I think the context that I would have to share with you all is that since I was literally stepping in Jordans, and the more I learned about this industry, I wanted to work at Nike. And when I finally got to Nike, to my quote unquote dream role, my interests and my passions had all shifted. And my wife is an entrepreneur, so we have a dual entrepreneur household. She makes ice cream, Kate's Ice Cream. If y'all like plant-based ice cream, that's my wife. And you're living in this household, and it's like, you got all these adult things. You have a mortgage. We have a duplex, so we have tenants. I'm like, what if they leave? And you're like, how are you gonna pay all these bills? But ultimately, we figured it out. We got really creative about how we were going to fund this thing and do all these things. And but it was tough. It took me from basically February of 2020 until July to make that decision. And there was just a lot happening in the world. There was, Ahmaud Arbery, there was George Floyd, there was COVID, there was at the same time, Claima was taking off. Like, we were charting on podcasts, we were having conversations with different partners, and it just felt like no time feels like the right time, right? Like, that's just not a thing. That's a fake thing. There's no such thing. But with that said, it just, everything, the energy just felt right to step into it at that time. Yeah. How about you, BJ?
My career path's a little different. I started off as an entrepreneur. In college, I started a streetwear brand that took off really big. It was called Dope. Scaled to about a $20-30 million business by the time I was like 25 years old, 26 years old. We had a store in LA on Fairfax and all that stuff. And then I started working Interscope Records and doing both jobs at the same time. So I was doing 2 jobs, and then I picked up a 3rd job managing artists in hip hop, managing artists and producers. So technically doing 3 8-hour jobs in a day for about 8 years. So then I took a year off and got a call from a guy named Chris Bevins, who said he wanted me to do his marketing for his brand, and landed in Oregon and kind of did the corporate route for a while, and then just did some freelance stuff for about a year, and then I linked with Bimma, and we kind of conceptualized and fleshed this thing out. And so that's how I kind of landed here.